This episode is proudly sponsored by Rattlesnake Cables. Rattlesnake Cables offer a wide variety of premium U.S. milled cables for the stage and studio, with diverse customization to fit your cable needs. They build dependability and style into your signal path. Rattlesnake Cables, the sound choice. Hey, the Rattlesnake team is giving you a chance to win 2 free cables. Just head over to rattlesnakecables.com/giveaway/Chris and Rick to enter. And our listeners save 20% on all regular priced items by using the code CR20. That's code CR20 to save 20%. Hey people, do you want to get your music into Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Tidal, and all the rest of the streaming services? Check out DistroKid. It's affordable and super easy to use. I've used it to distribute my music and I really dig it. Our listeners get 30% off at distrokid.com/talkguitars. That's 30% off for our listeners at distrokid.com/talkguitars. Go get it. Hey everybody, it's Chris and Rick Talk Guitars, and today we're going to talk about the seminal blues film from '86 called Crossroads with Ralph Macchio and Joe Seneca as the 2 leads in this thing. The basic plot is Ralph Macchio is this guitar prodigy, and he's fixated on the blues and specifically Robert Johnson and this missing song from his recording sessions back in, the old days. And Joe Seneca plays Willie Brown, quote, friend of Robert Johnson's. Essentially, Ralph Macchio pesters the hell out of this guy to go find this song with him and record it. So that's essentially the story. We watched it when it came out, but we just recently watched it for our homework, and we have a good time talking about this movie. But why don't you start us off, Chris, with whatever your initial takes are on this film?
Oh, geez, where to start? The reason we have this topic is a few weeks back, I saw the movie Twister come down one of those streaming feeds, and I had seen that movie in '96 when it came out, and back then I'm like, that was cheesy, it was formulaic or whatever, but for some reason I'm like, I want to watch this, so I watched it, and it's still cheesy and formulaic, but I had a blast. It was really fun. I didn't realize how much I needed it, so I'm like, we should find a movie, with some guitar and maybe the same thing that I can revisit.
I love it.
I didn't have the same reaction to that one. It wasn't as fun as that. I saw the movie when it first came out. I saw it on video cassette, very early on video cassette. So it was probably '87. I rented it from the video store. So this is probably the first time I've seen it since that. And I do remember I didn't like it back in the day. I was really into like the blues and Robert Johnson, the mythology surrounding him. And I thought, and I was really excited because it's like, I'm a guitarist. This is like everything that a guitarist would love, it's
right.
The blues guitar, this mythology of this great player, it's like, what's to go wrong? Everything went wrong for me. We should focus on the good parts first because
let's do that.
I liked a lot of the incidental music. I think a lot of it was Ry Cooder, just the setup music. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
Me coming off my Ry Cooder jag of listening to the Paris, Texas soundtrack. It was great for that. I love some of the cinematography. Some of the scenes looked really beautiful. And I love the setup in the hotel scene where they're setting up Robert Johnson for that famous recording that he did.
Yeah,
where he's facing the wall.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because that scene, they set him up with a microphone and he faces the wall. And there's been all this speculation over the years. It's like he was super shy. He couldn't face the guy or something. But a lot of people believe he was doing something called cornering, where you set up in front of a wall and it kind of boosts the bass and the mid-range of your instrument. So that's probably what he's doing because by all accounts, I don't think he was very shy.
Yeah.
So seeing that scene, and that's fairly early on, so I thought there was going to be more of that. And I would have loved it if there was more of that, but
I liked Joe Seneca as Willie Brown. I thought he was cool as the cranky old blues guy that wouldn't, didn't want to give this kid the time of day.
Right.
I liked that. Yeah.
Right. No, I was going to say that, especially like 3/4 of the movie, it was good. But then it was out of, anybody in this movie, it's not really their fault. It's just like the movie itself, which had problems with, which we should say that the person who wrote that movie,
John Fusca.
Yeah, John
Yeah.
Fusca. And he wrote that as a school dissertation for, in school. He got like award for it. And then he had someone that helped him sell that thing. So good for him. He went on to do a bunch of other work like that. He was a musician who kind of toured the South playing music. So he was, it was kind of probably a subject that was near and dear to him. So I'd be interested to see what he thought of what happened with that. So it had the best intentions in the world. And, it basically really, it's the Karate Kid with a fucking Telecaster. It must have been there must have been somebody who could have stepped in and said, you know what, we just did the Karate Kid 2 years ago and we got Karate Kid 2 coming out pretty soon. Maybe let's kind of stay away from having, the wise old man help Ralph Macchio learn this valuable lesson about this art form and then battle evil at the end. Maybe we could maybe focus on something else, because we have a whole world of really fascinating material. But they kind of did. I mean, and the director mentioned that at some point. He said, yeah, it's a totally different movie. And it's like, yeah, well, there's blues and the other one was karate. So yeah. But other than that, so that was kind of a turn off for me. It's just cliched. Yep. And there were just a lot of little bits of just like, what are their thinking moments?
Yeah, like you. I mean, initially when I first saw it, I kind of had high hopes too. I love that scene, like you're saying, that was set up with Robert recording in the corner and the guy capturing this really cool Delta blues cat that it was renowned even back then. I mean, he was a guy, he was a rock star essentially back then. Robert Johnson was, and then and I think it's just a missed opportunity. But the more I read about it, the more I saw that what happens with a lot of movies, or what did happen with a lot of movies, is people got involved from the studio or whoever to make, decisions about the story and about casting that affected the final product. Right. And so exactly like you were saying, I mean, I think, in different hands and with different people, it had the potential to be really cool. And like you said, it was his love letter to the blues, and especially Robert Johnson, because he was just so in love with that Delta blues stuff and those blues cats. And I just think it's another missed opportunity. And, I was really curious to know what Ry Cooder thought of some of this stuff. And sure enough, I read about, we'll talk about the final guitar duel, which is totally weird and non sequitur, because they're not even playing the blues really during this duel. And Ry Cooder tried to talk the suits out of this and said, hey, it was supposed to be this blues guitar duel between these it's a blues movie. What are you doing? And they're like, nah, we're gonna expand the audience a little bit on this, and I could just hear these ding dongs stepping on set and throwing their weight around. And sure enough, it shows. That final scene is
where
the
they
climax.
get Steve Vai. That's
Steve Vai.
Exactly. Anyone who hasn't seen the movie and they're thinking of a movie about Robert Johnson and the Delta Blues or whatever, and they're like, what's Steve Vai doing? Exactly. And the thing that bothered me most about that is the director hired Ry Cooder and Arlen Roth as guitar consultants for the movie, and both of them said, don't do that. It's like, why would you hire consultants and then fucking listen to them? So they did that. But, in the Look Who's Laughing Now anyway, that movie is beloved by many. It didn't do well when it came out, but it could have had like maybe a classic cult film or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It reminded me of Back to the Future at times. There's some of the things that were problematic in that movie too. Just dealing with early American music and stuff and like taking certain liberties.
Yeah.
Again, I like Ralph Macchio. I think he did as good as he could in that movie. And like you said, the dude that played Willie Brown, he was great. They even sold themselves out. They sold the story out. And I'm going to jump to that final thing, even though we're trying to get there slowly.
That's cool.
Because, at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, Ralph Macchio wins this guitar battle by Steve Vai throwing all this blues metal at him and all this other shit. And he's firing back, and Ralph starts to get on the ropes. He's kind of losing it. And what does he do? He reaches back into his bag of classical tricks, and he pulls out a classical lick, then slays Steve Vai. And I'm thinking, okay, in the first 10 minutes of the movie, we saw that he can play classical music.
Right.
But you're telling me this whole fucking movie, what mattered most, he already had. He didn't need to go on this big road trip or anything, because he already had what it took to win that fucking contest. It was like they just sold themselves out. So, yeah, that was like the big one where but it's the end of the movie and you're like, oh, man, they certainly squandered that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And to your point, we should say that in the movie, he's basically a guitar prodigy, and he's taking classical guitar lessons at Juilliard, of course. And so that is how that kind of resurfaces in this guitar duel. But I feel the same way. I mean, it is a total sellout, because it's like, it's, what won the blues guitar duel? Well, not the blues. The blues certainly didn't win it,
Yeah.
And there were little hints of the blues throughout the duel, but ultimately it was this shredder dude against this little kid prodigy that was steeped in classical music and whipped the classical shit out, at the last minute to fucking win the blues duel, which is weird. Yeah.
But that duel was taken from, head cutting, which was like, it actually is something that started out on the piano, where, pianists would try to outdo each other. But the way that they did it here was totally like what happened in the 80s with music. It was all like, who's the most technical, and some of those blues players who were like very into showmanship and really great. And they were kind of boasting with their playing, and they'd play against each other, but it wasn't this like more notes equals win. Right. So that was kind of annoying about that. And, they did shoot another scene with Steve Vai playing against Shuggie Otis. And he won. But they didn't put it in the movie, and I can understand why this might be problematic, because they didn't want to have Steve Vai beat a black blues player. You know what I mean? Yeah. Which makes sense. Well, but it's like, that's one indication that you probably picked the wrong person for that fucking part. Yeah. So, I mean, I liked the road portion of it, the trip. Yeah. Because and their dialogue back and forth was really fun and enjoyable. They just kind of sold themselves out. Even like the supernatural element of it, they didn't do that very well. It's like, we'll go to sepia tone here, and this may or may not be supernatural. We don't know. I'm not a big picker apart. I mean, I like zombie movies. You know what I mean? I'm not a big picker about like, that's not real, because first of all, he sold the soul to the devil for jobs, which isn't real. But I think that could have been done better too, and made it more exciting, and then it was definitely a missed opportunity, because that era that there's kind of focuses on, like the 30s and 40s and even like the 20s, like the Southern blues, that's the stuff that I really, really love. And that was why I was excited about this movie. And yeah,
me too. And it is a missed opportunity. And I think it could have been so much cooler in terms of just kind of getting other people psyched about that blues and Robert Johnson and the mythology about that stuff even more. Like you're saying, if they would have done a more creative job of tying in the history and the mythology into the story more. Because it was just done so superficially and so hackneyed, I thought. Like Willie was drawing this, it's like a children's coloring book of the Crossroads, and he shows it to somebody and goes, I don't know what I
have you seen this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've seen a million of them. Which one?
Every road throughout the South looks exactly like that.
Exactly. Like, so I thought that was strange and weird. It's like, and again, the more I read about it, sure as shit, the suits got involved. And I think so much art gets ruined and trampled by business decisions or business people or studios or whatever it is. And like you were saying, I mean, a lot of people love this movie and they don't give a shit, but I just love it when the creative people are left for the most part to their own devices to create art, because that's usually when the best art is created. And it bums me out, like, to think about somebody who was involved with that maybe has misgivings about what it ended up being, even though it is beloved now by a lot of people, just as a piece of art out there in the world, because if you're the person who had the vision or whatever, and it didn't come out the way you wanted it to, you have to live with that for the rest of your life, and it's like, even though some people dig it a lot, it's like, well, shit. It's like, I read that about artists all the time. I wrote this song and, some people got involved and we released it and I'm not happy with it. And I'm in a supermarket listening to this fucking version of this song that I hate for the rest of my life.
It seemed to me almost like, when I was looking into the reasons behind that, especially with the bringing Steve Vai on board, it was like they wanted to widen the appeal, but the entire subject matter of the movie has a fairly narrow appeal to begin with. Yeah. So I think there was like some blockbuster fever going on. I mean, Karate Kid was huge. Back to the Future was huge. And he had a nice young star who was going to sell some tickets, Ralph Macchio. Yeah. And so he just maybe he got worried at the end. Well, we need to bring somebody else in. What about Steve Vai? And I don't know. I mean, did Steve Vai was he that popular in 1986? I mean, I think it would bring a whole bunch of people on board. I mean, certainly some people might, but I don't know. It was a really odd thing to do. And I looked for a Ry Cooder interview specifically talking about that movie, and I couldn't find one. but he did mention something about in his opinion, the movie went down the tubes. I think that's what he said. But I couldn't find him. I couldn't find anywhere where he'd elaborate on that. But I don't know. The movie worldwide did like $5 million. And I don't know what that is for 86. I mean, I should have looked to see what like something like Back to the Future Karate Kid did, because I think it was a lot more than that.
Yeah, it seems small to me too.
It's funny that you mentioned that Crandoring, because that was bugging me forever. Another thing too, this is 1986, right? There wasn't somebody like in wardrobe that says, you know what, for this movie, let's have Ralph Macchio roll his sleeves down. You know what I mean? We don't want him to look like he's selling cheap trick tickets in the high school cafeteria or something. You know, okay, I got a sport jacket with the sleeves rolled up. Maybe we could cut that for just this movie, maybe. I don't know.
And like, you know, guitar players only give a shit, or people, or even guitar players that only give a shit about how an actor looks when they're playing an instrument, whether it's piano or guitar or whatever. And he never looked comfortable to me with the guitar, whether he was, you know, however he's handling it. And it reminded me of a Miles Davis interview where he said, you can tell by the way somebody picks up the instrument if they're going to play it or not.
Right.
And you can totally tell that when you look at Ralph Macchio, because it just looks like he's this dude that's never seen a guitar in his life, and he picks it up. And then along the lines of what we were talking about in terms of weirdness and non sequitur stuff, where he and Willie are in this pawn shop, and Willie's telling him, you got to get a real guitar. It's like, dude, you've got an old Martin that is fucking closer to what Robert Johnson played than the Telly you got, which Tellys are cool, but that was another weird decision, you know, to go electric, but maybe they had to set him up for this Steve Vai duel.
Yeah, you have to get a late 60s Telecaster. Get rid of this 30s Martin and get a late 60s Telecaster and a pig nose solid state amp so you can get more blues cred. You're right. It was just to set up the juke joint scene that was coming up and the rest of it, because he would have been drowned out because they didn't have good pickups. I don't know. There's lots of moments like that. Like, what are they thinking with this? Where are they going with that? Exactly.
Or the love interest. Again, I mean, there's so many weird things that were just thrown in that seem superficial and not thought out, again, because her story was weird and it just seemed to be an afterthought. Oh yeah, well he needs some girl that he kind of digs real and then loses so he can feel the blues. Yeah.
That's so ridiculous. It's like, yeah, you have the blues. You hung out with this girl for 3 days and she left, so now you got the blues. You know, that's it. You have cred now. What else it kind of reminded me was Eddie and the Cruisers. I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
Yes, I did.
It's kind of had that level of cheese and cringe to it. Yeah. So I should have picked that one.
You should. Well, that might be coming up. But just back to the missed opportunity. I that's what bums me out about movies like this, is I think the germ of the idea is cool, you know, because Robert Johnson is this mythical blues dude that is steeped in folklore, and to write a love letter script to this guy and this genre and then to have it made in such a superficial way, again, is just a missed opportunity. And it bums me out.
They had people telling him, there's a lot of people that, you know, have some of these thoughts like, yeah, you know, maybe don't do it that way or something like that. So,
well, you hire experts, right? And
they did
again. Yeah. And this just shows like really how business views the quote experts they hire, you know, where they're willing to override. And I did read some, a partial interview with Ry Cooder, and he was adamant about it, that you shouldn't do this because it's not the blues, and B, it's going to date the movie, which both those things I think occur as a result of this big guitar duel scene that they ignored the experts' suggestions on.
One thing I will say, just throw something else positive on there.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about even Steve Vai's tone, and I think it was Ry Cooder that was doing his other parts, but those guitars sounded amazing at that duel, I thought.
They did.
Later, metal got kind of tinny and thin. That was like a big, throaty, like, excellent. And there's 2 Carvin stacks on stage. I don't know if they were using those.
It's an endorsement for Carvin.
Probably, yeah.
Who knows?
Probably not. It sounded really good.
It did sound good. And the soundtrack is cool. I mean, it's, you know, there's lots of good blues in there, Rise throughout the thing. And then other old blues artists are in there too, playing harp and stuff like that. So that's cool. For me too, Steve, and nothing against Steve Vai. He was just coming in to do a thing, but to me, the whole thing is so cringeworthy, the way he's acting and the way he's kind of doing his thing. And it to me also visually, and sonically, it was just such a departure from my expectation going, before I saw the movie and saw it for the first time, my expectation is, oh, this is a blues movie. The final duel that they're leading up to is going to be this blues duel. And sure as shit, this weird thrasher dude comes out and a shredder dude, I should say, and starts shredding, kind of what was going on at the time for hair metal and shit like that. Or maybe the precursor to hair metal, but it was just weird. It's just weird visually and weird sonically and didn't work at all. And
yeah, he got his ass handed to him with some metal-infused Paganini, which Eugene knew at the beginning of the movie. So it's like, why did you do this?
Totally, man.
You didn't learn anything.
He's like the Tin Man. You had it all along or whatever.
I mean, it was almost like they had a checklist. This is what I think the blues are about. So let's go through our checklist.
Yes.
First of all, we have to play a juke joint. He has to get his heart broken. We have to, mention this pact with the devil. And we have to do this head-cutting bit at the end. So check. And they did it really fast. So you never really felt like Eugene was absorbing his surroundings and putting it into the blues. The scene where after the woman leaves and he's telling her about, well, that's the blues, like Willie is telling Eugene about the blues, and he turns around and looks at his Telecaster. That was like the most cringe thing in the world. He's like, there it is. I've got the blues. I finally got the blues. I had to lose this chick that I was hanging out for 2 days. So.
Yeah, and I thought that was, there wasn't enough time for character development at all, because I don't feel Ralph Macchio's character developed at all. Or right. Like you're saying, I mean, that was such a super, if he'd known this girl that he met for 3 days, maybe 2.5 days. Yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous. I just think the way it was dealt with was so superficial and so trite, like you're saying, that it was just, I mean, it could have been, they could have developed his character a lot more and where he really went on this educational journey with this old blues guy, to learn, but he just was still the same old snotty, Juilliard prodigy, essentially, that with a little ding in his heart because he lost this girl that he met and knew for 3 days. But
yeah, that's like, we didn't buy that for a minute that that she broke his heart. We didn't buy that he got. I mean, it's just like rush, do this, do this. It's got the blues. It's like a white person's idea of what the blues are all about. Here
exactly. Yeah.
See, the thing about that, the head cutting scene too, that I had kind of a problem with, is blues came to be at least associated by a lot of modern blues. It just came all about notes and solos, and it just been perpetuated. For me, anyway, what really moves me at the blues, it's all rhythm. You know what I mean? It's like that syncopated rhythm. One time I went to Detroit and I saw John Lee Hooker. I was so psyched. Got up there and John Lee Hooker started playing, but he had like almost like the world's most dangerous band type thing where he had really good musicians around him. He had like a woman backup singer and he's doing all this stuff. And I'm watching, I'm like, this is cool. I'm like, I love John Lee Hooker, but and at one point he sent everybody off stage, and for like half an hour or to 45 minutes, he sat in a chair and played his electric guitar and stomped on the floor. And that was the fucking blues. That's what it is. I mean, and Robert Johnson too, talk about a freak of nature. Totally. I don't think anyone's ever learned to play quite like him.
No.
There was a woman, Rory Block, who was a player that I guess she came really close to like copping his style, and I think she's taught people, but he was just phenomenal, like just mind blowing. I mean, like people would hear him and say, "Who's playing the second guitar in there?" It's all him. Plus, he's singing, his phrasing, everything. It's like that's what that should have been about. And that's again going back to that old blues type showmanship, and the idea of a contest where there's two hot players up there. Yeah. They're working the crowd. You know what I mean? They're like playing the stuff, and it's not just like count the notes. You know what I mean? It's like they're in it. They are bluesmen. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's pretty lofty things to expect from, a movie like that. But very early on, when I saw that hotel scene, like from a historical point of view, like one of the things about his life, more of that. I don't know how, but you work more of that. I thought you were going to go there. I thought you were going to maintain there, but I don't know.
Well, so, I mean, what's your rating of this movie?
It's, what's the rating scale? What's the scale?
I don't know. 5? Well, there's Siskel and Ebert, thumbs up, thumbs down, or there's a 5. Yeah, there's 5 stars. But yeah, I just see this particularly as just a missed opportunity. I think it could have been much better, and I think they had the wherewithal to do it. It's all decisions, it's all just decisions made at the time based on all these factors. But so that just bums me out. But
yeah, so 2 stars.
Okay, 2 stars. Okay,
yeah. Out of 100. No,
I was gonna say
out of 5. 2 out of 5, maybe 2.5. I could do 2.5. One thing I'll say about it that it had a huge influence on me is that yellow white guard Telecaster. I fell in love with that color, and I actually owned one once in my life. That kind of sold the look of that Telecaster. Ralph Macchio got to keep that guitar too. He has that guitar, and people have offered him like incredible sums of money for it, but he said no. And cool.
You said it's a '68, Telly?
It's with late '60s because it's got the slab board, stunt stripe, and I think that was late '60s. So.
That's cool. So you'd give it a 1 maybe, or 1.5?
No, I'm going to go 2.5. What are you going to give it?
I think I'm in the same range. Maybe 2 or something. Maybe a generous 2.5.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to love it.
Yeah, me too.
5 stars.
Well, me too. I wanted to love it too. You know, when I see a movie like that that's directed at my interests, I wanna dig it and enjoy it. But yeah. Well, as always, thanks for listening, everybody out there, and check us out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, any service that you use to check out podcasts. And we are proud members of the Ruinous Media Network, so check us out there too. You got any parting thoughts, Chris?
No, just play guitar, get a blues hat. That was another key feature in the movie. He had to get a blues hat when he got his Telecaster. So, yeah, get a blues hat and play guitar.
See ya.